Hi folks, you join me in my wife's Mercedes E220d W213, and this is going to be an initial video, the first video on this car on the channel. And we're going to be doing a couple of things. First, we're going to talk about why I got this car for my wife for her particular purpose. She's a real estate agent here in Singapore. So we'll talk about that, and I'll talk about this particular car itself, the specs, and what we have kind of found about a month of ownership. So first things first. So I was looking for. So my wife had one criteria. She wanted a saloon, good or bad. That's just what she wants. She doesn't want a hatchback. She doesn't want an SUV. Thank God. She wanted a saloon, and she wanted a luxury saloon. The other thing to note, of course, is because she's a real estate agent, is that she does a significant amount of mileage. She does about 2,000 kilometers, like maybe 1,300 miles plus a month, which by Singapore standards is a lot. So there was something there that I thought that it kind of makes sense to have a diesel. The W213 E-Class is a very interesting model in my opinion, because it has a little bit of that blend of the old and new. This particular car is from 2017, so it's one of the earlier W213s. But it's fairly modern. This is not the highest spec car, so it doesn't have screens. It has actual dials, and even the center console screen is not very large. But you know what? It kind of works because it's got everything you need. It doesn't have Apple CarPlay and all of that. It's a simple retrofit, which my wife doesn't want. But in general, this is a car that is a used car at the moment. So it's very, very affordable, relatively speaking, yet it's as modern as you would expect. The predecessor of this car, the W212, which I had before, the E400, actually felt like it was, from a different era. It was from an era, a pre-smartphone era. This car actually feels like it is from the smartphone era. So, what was our criteria as we were looking at what cars to consider buying? We had this, then we had the BMW 520d. As it turns out, in Singapore, for some reason, Mercedeses are more expensive than BMW. But when it comes to diesels, and they're very few, because in Singapore, diesels are not really that common. Apparently, no Mercedes buyer wants a diesel Mercedes. So these are incredibly affordable relative to the 520d. Not only that, these are incredibly affordable relative to the E200, yeah, let alone the E250. Right, so all of that combined made this have a lot of sense. This particular car that you see over here is a one owner car, so it's had one owner since January 2017. It had done about 90,000 kilometers, which is about, say, 55,000 miles, so relatively low mileage, especially for that, and totally stock other than one modification. Well, not a modification, the previous owner swapped out the wheels, the standard 17-18-inch wheels, for these 19-inch OEM Mercedes wheels, these black. I don't know what the actual number of those wheels are, but they're pretty good. Okay, so that's the car. We've got it so far. What have been my thoughts? And of course the color before we get into the car. This is a beautiful color. It's a pearlescent color. It has sparkles of almost violet in the sunlight. It can look almost black at night. So the color is one of the reasons that my wife really liked it. Now, thoughts on the car so far. So firstly, other than the screen business, this car is actually very well spec'd. It has, you can see the double sunroof on top. It has everything you need, of course, electric memory seats, both on the driver's side and the passenger side. The thing in Singapore is that cars that are brought here are usually very highly spec'd. This has a black interior, and this to me seems like Article leather. I can't be sure, but I'm fairly certain. But even then, it's just feel like a very, very expensive car. And as I was talking about feeling modern, given that this is the W213, it has the lighting in the interior and everything. So unlike older cars, which have a lot less interior lighting, so that helps in the overall relatively modern feel of the car. The seats also are quite relatively nice and sporty compared to what you would get in, I would say, typical Mercedes. These one particular have a lot of side support. So that's something I also appreciate about this car. So what have been our impressions so far? The big thing has been the engine, and there's been good and there's bad. Let me talk about the good. This car is incredibly fuel efficient. So in Singapore, I would say that I typically, on a normal 3-liter 6-cylinder car, like I usually drive, right, a BMW 6 Series 640i or a Alpina 335, Alpina B3, or the 740 that I currently have, uh, I typically get about 6 kilometers to the liter in the city, and I get about 12 kilometers to the liter on the highway. You can do your conversions for MPG. That's what I typically get. This car, I basically get double of that. So this car easily does 12 kilometers per liter in the city, start, stop traffic, traffic lights, all of that. And it does 20 plus, maybe 22 kilometers per liter on the highway, which is incredible. It's just incredible. The fuel efficiency is the standout feature of this car and this engine. And it basically costs less than half to run compared to the other typical petrol 6 cylinders that I've had, because diesel is also a little bit cheaper when you compare it to petrol. So there's that. It's incredibly fuel efficient. Uh, it's also quite torquey. It's got 400 Newton meters, so you feel it. This is not a car that you drive like a high revving petrol car. You have to. The difference is this is less of a switch. So a high revving car or a turbo car is a bit like a switch, because you press it, a delayed switch, and there's a slight lag, either kick down or turbo lag, and then it just all the power hits you at once. This particular car, it's like a tidal wave, literally like a tidal wave. So you press the accelerator and then it builds up, and then it builds up incredibly. So it's not something you enjoy revving out as such, but you can make pretty good progress, particularly with this car, because it has a 19-inch wheels. It's very well handling. We'll come to the handling in a second. So you can make incredibly good progress with this car. Now the bad about the engine, it doesn't feel that refined. The one thing about this car that has really shocked me is, and maybe I'm just a petrol head, that I've only driven petrol cars, so I can't really give an accurate assessment on diesel cars. Though I did have the M5 X50, sorry, X5 M50D, that also gave me a lot of trouble, right? This car, you can feel the diesel rattle, you can hear the diesel rattle when you start the car. On the go, it's okay, and maybe it's because my other car currently is a 7 Series, which is incredibly hushed, the G12 7 Series long wheelbase. So because of that, this car, despite being a Mercedes, ended up feeling rather unrefined. That's kind of been one of my complaints. Initially, it felt a lot worse. Right now, maybe we're used to it. But yeah, the amazing fuel efficiency comes at a price. The price is that it's not doesn't feel to me as refined as a petrol car. Does this mean your passengers will notice? Does this mean that this is not a luxury car? No, I don't think so. By the way, did you hear that the start-stop system kick back into life? You could have heard it right now. It's a jolt. Like you feel it, especially if you're looking for it. And I'm kind of a little bit OCD when it comes to cars. I'm kind of noticing everything. But does this mean that this is not a luxury car? Does this mean your passengers will complain that you've bought some sort of unrefined thing? Not at all. It's just I'm comparing it to the silky smooth inline sixes that I'm kind of used to with BMW, right? So that's probably the reason why. And of course, right now, a 7 Series. So that's one thing to note. The engine that kind of defines the car in more ways than one. That's one important thing to know. What else? The other surprising thing about this car that I have really liked is the handling. And maybe it's the 19-inch rims, but definitely it's more than, you can't just swap rims on a car and make it a better handling car. I think one thing that Mercedes has surprised me is that, when I drove the F generations BMWs, the F10 5 Series or the Grand Coupe, whatever the number is, F06 or whatever, which I had before this, and there will be a wrap-up video on the Grand Coupe, 640i Grand Coupe coming soon. So when I drove those cars, they feel big and heavy. They feel really big and heavy. And at that time, I drove the W213 E220d, and that felt small. And I was like, these two are similarly weighing, similarly sized cars. And now even this car, this is a 4.9 meter long car, but you wouldn't know it. It just feels so compact. It just feels like a small car to me, honestly. It doesn't feel like a hot hatchback, but given that this thing has a diesel engine in front, and it's a 4.9 long meter car, you would expect it to feel like a barge. It just doesn't. It is incredibly agile. Like, the handling of the car is beyond the fuel efficiency, which is an outcome. On a day-to-day basis while driving, my favorite part about the car is the handling. And I don't know what the previous owner has done. Maybe there are some OEM, maybe there are some aftermarket shocks on this car. I don't know. Because I have just been blown away by the handling of this car. This, to me, is not it's not like a BMW and as such, where BMWs feel very particularly rear wheel drive. I don't know how to explain it. Like even in small corners, etc., when you're taking a turn and everything, you just squirt a little bit of throttle or whatever, you can feel the back. You don't have to do anything silly. You can just feel a touch of movement on the back. That kind of what BMWs have. This doesn't have that. That said, it's a very well balanced car. I really, really enjoy driving it. Beyond the the getting used to the way the power delivery happens, just you can hustle it around, you can corner with ease, you have all the confidence. If accidentally sometimes you need to take a maneuver faster than you would like, you have the confidence that this car is not going to give you any trouble at all. So that has been the other thing about this car that has really surprised me. Space wise, and I'm going to stop the car in about a couple of minutes so we can take a look at it. Space-wise, the car is good. It's spacious enough. I will say that it does not feel like ravenously spacious. It does not feel like a very, very large car, but it feels more than good enough. Of course, this car is used as a taxi in Europe, so it has to be of a certain size. But it's perfectly good enough for 5 passengers in comfort. It's a car that you would really, really enjoy. Okay, let's just stop over here, and then we'll take a deeper look around the car. All right, so here's the car. You can see it could use a little bit of a wash, but that's okay. This incredible color, which in the sunlight, which we don't have much of right now, has this pearl flake on it. Perhaps you can see it a little bit better over here. These are the non-standard wheels that I mentioned. These are 19-inch, and the previous owner actually put what are these? PS5s, Pilot Sport 5s on this one. So this kind of is one of the reasons why this car drives as nicely as it does. Moving around to the back, same 19-inch 245 by 45s at the back, and yeah. The other thing with this car is visually it doesn't look its size. So it's a 4.9 meter long car. It just looks so compact because of all of the curves. If I compare it to my 7 Series, that feels very slab-sided. This one feels very curvy. It's a great design. I actually think this generation of E-Class is a very, very good, very, very beautiful design. And if you look at the front and everything, you look at the headlamps and everything, it looks very, very modern. By the way of note, in this generation, the C-Class has 1 mustache or 1 eyebrow. The E-Class has 2 and the S-Class has 3. Just an easy way for you to differentiate this particular generation of Merc. Let's open up the car. Opening up the car and closing it, it has a typical solid Mercedes feel. Looking inside, maybe I'll do it from the other side so I don't block anyone. So standard, this is the black, whatever is the black article leather, very nice. Well, as I was mentioning, good support, side support of the seats. The dash still looks very, very modern because look at it, it's quite swooping. You've got all the lighting below the side trim, and this particular car is in pretty good shape, as you can tell, right? The back seats are practically unused. I use a little bit more now for my wife, but yeah. Boot space wise, large enough boot. We put the liters here, and there you can see the paraphernalia of being a realtor. Very, very useful. There we go. Yeah, all the paraphernalia is here. Yep, oh yeah. That's my wife right there. That's her stuff. Anyways, it has all the typical luxury car. You have a button to close the boot, which I find rather hilarious on saloons, but hey. And there's the back seat. Very, very spacious. Overall, it's a very good use of space, honestly, in this car, because it's a very curvy car. It looks like it should not have that much space, because look at how pronounced that C-pillar is. But when you actually go inside, and you sit down, as I have sat down right now, and I'm going to flip it back so you can see me. It's all good. Look at that. I mean, I'm not very tall, but I'm sitting absolutely ramrod straight. I'm about 1.73, yeah, 173 centimeters, 1.73 meters. Absolutely fine. What else? You know, this is a very nice place to be from the back as well. You get a good sense of the curvy swoop dashboard. I actually prefer this to the latest cars, because latest cars are just dominated by a screen. This one actually has a lot of physical buttons. Speaking of which, you can see them all over here. What I really like in Mercedes compared to the BMW is how the drive select works, because this is so convenient, such a nice button. You just like using this button, drive select. The volume button over here is okay. It's not necessarily what you expect, but it's okay. It's over there. The Mercedes iDrive command system, iDrive is BMW. I find BMW a little bit better, but it's absolutely workable. The analog watch is a nice touch. One thing that I find a little irritating are the aircon controls, because you have to reach all the way to the left for the fan, and then sometimes the aircon controls are not visible if something else is visible. So it's kind of a little bit of fishing every time you want to adjust the aircon. The BMW is just, there are two sets of fan controls on left or right, so it's easier. Mercedes, small niggles, but that's okay. This one, as I told you, is a high spec car, so it has the actual physical dial, which I really like. The only problem is that they are kind of curved in the wrong direction, so it's always giving you a sense of having a lower speed than you're actually at. So you have to be a little bit careful when you monitor the speed. There's a little bit of a convex error when you're using it, just something to know. Looking at the side panel, this is where it really comes to life, right? This beautiful Mercedes and this beautiful, normally I'm not a fan of aluminum things, but this billeting is really nice. Another thing that you see is when you look at the power window switches, those are much nicer. If you go to a C-Class or something, those have horrible black plastic. So this is where you see the difference between E-Class. In general, all the switches in this car feel very, very nice, very, very premium. It's quite a nice car. Okay, so this is the beginning. We'll keep an eye out on it. We've done about 1,000 kilometers so far. It's done incredibly fuel efficiency wise. The only issue with the car is that the radio sometimes it cannot find itself. So the device for the radio sometimes disappears. That has been literally the main issue we've had with the car. The second issue that we've had with the car, whether you want to call it an issue or not, is the wipers. The wipers can be incredibly noisy. I believe it's a Mercedes thing, and in Singapore it rains a lot. So I got my friend in the workshop to do a couple of things. They did some polishing of the windscreen, etc. It seems to have solved the problem, but apparently he said he has an older E-Class as well, a C-Class, and he said that this is a perennial problem when it comes to Mercedes. So it's just something to note. So yeah, so far so good. We'll keep an eye out. I'll probably do a monthly update on this car, and I'll see you next time.